All right, let's continue with the football conversation. Good stuff with Johnny Mack and on the Eagles and all the offseason stuff, the coaching search for them. But let's get back into championship weekend. We have the Super Bowl set, and to do it with us, NFL Insider KC Joyner is here to look back at the two matchups we saw on Championship Sunday. KC, welcome back, man. How are you, pal?
Hey, great to be here.
Well, here we are, Super Bowl 54. It's all set up, but how did we get here? Let's first start with that AFC matchup. The Tennessee Titans, Casey, the blueprint was perfect for them. Get up early. They're up 10-0. They run the ball. How did they let that one slip away?
They let that one slip away. Believe it or not, I think the reason they let it slip away is because Kansas City, you go back to the halftime, and the Titans have run the ball a ton, and Kansas City's passed the ball a ton, and Kansas City's up 20-17. And they traded drives in the third quarter, and Kansas City had been pass-heavy on their drive, and Tennessee had been run-heavy on their drive, and neither of them scored. And then Kansas City on the last drive of the third quarter, Romo was talking about this on a broadcast, when you look back on the whole drive, 13-play drive, 8 planned rushing plays and 2 scramble plays. So 10 plays out of 13, they ended up running the football. They go down and score and make it 28-17, and then Tennessee had 1 rushing attempt after that, and that was a Tannehill scramble. So Kansas City, as we were talking last week, Kansas City has now shown the ability to be able to run the ball and win with defense, not just for passing. And it's when Kansas City made that switch on that drive and said, we're going to go ahead and do it this way and see if the Tennessee Titans can stop us, and they couldn't. I think that changed the whole game.
All right, well, they changed the game that way, but were you surprised at the way they were able to kind of stand up to Derrick Henry defensively? Because on Friday's show, we were a little concerned about how their defense would stack up against that Titans run game.
It was surprising, although Kansas City has been very stout against running backs over the course of the season. In fact, if you look at since Week 13, they allowed 66 yards to running backs versus the Patriots, 49 to the Broncos, 65 to the Bears. They allowed 103 to the Chargers, but then 55 to the Texans, and then 69 to the Titans. I mean, they have been slowing down opposing running games very well, and the reason they were doing it is they were winning point-of-attack battles up front. You talk about bringing the safety up, and they'll do that. But if you really want to stop the ground game, you got to be able to win point-of-attack blocks, and they were winning them on a consistent enough basis to where, okay, Henry's only going to get maybe a yard or two, or they had times they were meeting him in the backfield, and now you're starting to put Tennessee into that situation where it's 2nd and 9, let's say. And if you're in those situations, it's really difficult to stick with the ground game because maybe you get 4 yards on the next play and it's 3rd and 5. Do you risk running on 3rd and 5? You probably don't. So they were able to hold off enough of those situations. And in fact, Derrick Henry's longest run yesterday was 13 yards. So they didn't let him get any breakaway plays either. He might have got some consistent gains, but no big breakaway plays. So just win a point-of-attack battles and go be physical and tackle the guy. A lot of teams don't want to do it, and they did.
So Sammy Watkins has kind of come out in the last 2 games and had some big plays. I never know what to make of him, KC, because he's never really fulfilled what he was supposed to be when he was a top 5 pick. Bounced around, been hurt. But now he's kind of coming alive. What have you seen from him on tape? Is he as explosive as always, and just not always getting the ball, or situational?
I think that they've just decided, he's got so much of the time that he's not been very good pros because he's been banged up and things, and I think that they're able to use him now as a counterpuncher. They're finding now that they can use counterpunches too, like they do, like with I think it was Hardman who got the big pass interference penalty against Trey Brock. As a situation there, they said, okay, fine, we're going to take him. We know he's going to get doubled, and they set that play up to get the over out for Hardman to get the pass interference. I think they're doing a lot of that. And Watkins, by the way, when he came out of college, I remember doing his metrics when he was at Clemson, and I literally had to do a triple check of the metrics because they were so phenomenal. I couldn't believe they were this good. Like, this can't be right. I must have done something wrong math-wise. That's how big play he is, and I think they just realized they can use him now as a counterpuncher. Because if you came into this contest and you said Hill's going to catch 5 for 67, Kelsey's going to catch 3 for 30. If you said that about the Chiefs passing game, you'd be thinking, okay, the Titans are going to the Super Bowl. But they've got a guy like Watkins who has that history, and I think he's healthy enough now to use him as a counterpuncher, and the Titans didn't have anybody. Their secondary was weak enough to where you can, if you're going with a good counterpuncher like that, you can get 114 yards on a TD.
Yeah, I know that we had talked Friday about matching up with the Chiefs secondary, but what is it about what Andy Reid and that offense does so well that has made them such a difficult team to stop over, especially, all year long. Obviously, they're very good, but you're playing better competition, and yet it doesn't seem to slow them down.
No, it doesn't, but that's the thing we can talk about. That this is now a team. I said on Twitter yesterday after the game, I said I thought that the two best teams in the playoffs made the Super Bowl. And the Ravens fans came out of the woodwork telling me what a fool I was. My God, the Ravens were 14-2. And I'm like, guys, if you look at the ways these teams can win, the Chiefs, if they need to pass the ball, we've talked about their great passing attack, and obviously they've got Mahomes, they've got Hill, and they've got Kelsey, and they've got Watkins. And Watkins, again, if Watkins plays to his talent level, and he doesn't miss a bunch of games, he has the capacity to be a number one receiver in the league or a great vertical threat. So they've got all that. We showed they can run the football. We just talked about that. They can get their ground game going. They've got good blocking. They get quality good blocking numbers, and they've got running backs who are good enough to get that. And now they've got the defense to do it. They can win all three ways, and other teams, the Ravens really, they couldn't win as well with the passing game because they don't have the passing targets that the Chiefs had. So I just think that the Chiefs have now developed, and they went about it in a very intentional way. We're going to develop our passing game, and now we're going to develop a ground game, and we're going to improve our defense. We're going to be able to win in all of these ways, and that's what makes them maybe the most dangerous team in the league right now.
So how do you go about stopping that or doing enough to actually beat them?
You get them into a shootout. That's what San Francisco is going to need to do. That's what Tennessee couldn't do. Remember we talked last week that the Chiefs, actually Tennessee technically did because they got that touchdown late. So, but by then the game was out of. They really didn't get into a shootout mode because they were already down by 35-17 score, and then they turned it technically into a shootout. But if you can get them into a true shootout game, that's how you do it. Because they're 500 if they play shootout games the last couple of years, and they're 16 and now 17-1 or 16-1 when they don't play a shootout game over the past two seasons. So you get them into that kind of a shootout contest where they're having to match big play for big play, and that's where you've got to be able to get over the top of their defense. I don't know if that's what San Francisco is going to be capable of doing because they don't have the kind of passing game to do that, but that's what you got to do is get them into a track meet.
Casey, we don't talk enough about Kansas City's offensive line. They lost Morse in the offseason, and he's one of my favorite centers to watch. He's so athletic, and he gets out on those the outside zone so well. I thought they were going to really struggle there, and even though I liked Kansas City to make the Super Bowl, but they haven't, and their run game, as you mentioned, has been effective. What do they do schematically this year that it's got to be different from what they did last year? I mean, they certainly lost like a special kind of player when Morse left for the Bills.
Yeah, they did. I just think that they concentrate on being his own team and having consistency in their blocking because they don't have the breakaway backs to give them much more, but they have a very consistent offensive line. And I look at teams when I'm breaking down the running games. I've got my metrics of good blocking rate and good blocking yards per attempt, and I combine them in a metric called GBP, which is good blocking productivity. The gist of it is you can either be a really consistent blocking team where you've got a high good blocking rate. You could be a breakaway team where you've got high good blocking yards per attempt. When you get good blocking, you're getting long gains, or you can have the consistency to get you to both. They've got enough of consistency and they've got enough breakaway that they get solid numbers in the good blocking productivity category. They're top 10 team in that category. They're not an elite team, but when you're that good and you can block at a consistent enough pace and you've got enough backs, and they've been able to rotate backs and get productivity out of all those backs. When you can do that and you've got enough of that much of a running game, other teams have to keep paying attention to your ground attack schematically. They cannot just sit back and say, okay, we're going to stop the passing game. We have to stop the ground game. So it's that they get that solid good blocking productivity number is what really makes them stand out, that they're consistent enough.
All right, Casey, let's flip over to see what the 49ers were able to do. When I say 49ers, do you think of them as an offensive team or a defensive team?
I think of them more as a defensive team, but I think power football. And we've been talking for a long time about them. In fact, for years on the show, we talk about how power football has worked. It never doesn't work if you can do it well, and if you can continually win in the power football departments, you can stop the run and you can dominate on the ground like that. Then then you're going to win ball games. And San Francisco realized that. And that's why they were able to turn the team around as fast as they were, because they said, "Hey, power football works. Let's build a power football team."
Right. So I asked you that question because when they won the game yesterday, they win with power football, but how much of that was their defense giving the Packers so many problems, or how much was it setting the tone with their run game?
I think it's setting the tone with the run game is where it starts, because Rodgers, look, at halftime of that contest, Rodgers was 9 of 12 for 65 yards. He ends the game with some fantastic numbers, over 31 of 36, nearly, not quite 10 yards per attempt, but close. And people were saying what a great game he had. No, he didn't have a great game. And Devontae Adams only had one catch for 7 yards in the first half. And the reason is San Francisco was able to dominate in the ground game so well that Green Bay immediately became a one-dimensional team. Green Bay wants to be a power running team too, but they can't run the ball nearly as well as San Francisco could, because we talked last week about Green Bay's run defense and how atrocious it was. I can't believe they were as horrible as they were. I knew it was a mismatch, but my God, I mean, they didn't matter if they brought 8 guys in the box. Didn't matter what scheme they had. They didn't. Somebody asked Kyle Shanahan after the game, "Why'd you keep running the ball?" Because it was working. Why would we not? And I just it's an embarrassment for the Packers that they weren't able to stop the ground game, and it shows why the NFC North teams are trying to build powerhouse teams, because they realize that the Packers can't stop the ground.
Do you think that Jimmy Garoppolo has enough to win this game if somehow the Chiefs are able to slow down that ground attack? And what's the plan for the 49ers? Do they get a little bit cute, change it up, or they're just going to stick to what they know, obviously, and force the Chiefs to make Jimmy G beat them?
I think the Chiefs have shown that you can flip those good blocking rate and all those good blocking metrics. You can flip them on the defensive side and say, okay, what do you do well defensively? The Chiefs don't allow breakaway gains. They showed that yesterday, that if you do beat them on the point of attack, they're going to shed blocks quickly. They're going to go make tackles quickly. They're going to, they're not going to let you get big gainers. So the Niners are going to have some problems. They're not a team that always gets a lot of big gains. They're not a breakaway team all the time. Mostert can do it. Coleman, not so much. He maybe, but Breida is sort of, but really Mostert's the best breakaway back, and you're not talking he's a Derrick Henry. But the point is that I think that the Chiefs are going to be able to slow that ground game down, and you are going to have Garoppolo throw the ball more. And Garoppolo's biggest problem is that he has terrible bad decision rate numbers where he forces tons of passes into coverage. And I think if you do that against the Chiefs, they will pick off more than their share, and Mahomes just doesn't do that. So I think Garoppolo having a good game is a must for the 49ers, because if he doesn't play well in that contest, it's going to be a problem for them.
It stuck out to me in the Vikings game 2 weeks ago that they tried to lure Jimmy into some bad plays. You saw Kendricks kind of almost look like he was going to play the slant, but then come right back into the middle of the field to get his hands on a few balls there. And I wonder if Spagnuolo sees that and thinks, we can dupe this guy. We can almost make it look like guys are open and with a disguised coverage, and then bang, pick a few off when we fool them right after the snap. Yeah,
I think partly because Garoppolo is also to me, he's a fastball pitcher, and Bill James used to say about fastball pitchers that that if you try to get them to throw changeups, they don't want to do it. They want to throw fastballs. They don't, you can if you said to a fastball pitcher, you can throw curves and get this guy out. They don't want to do it. They want to throw the fastball because they got the big arm. I think Garoppolo has that sort of I want to be a gunslinger and take those chances, and that's not what the 49ers need in that offense. They don't need that sort of thing, and I think the defensive coordinators have realized you can bait the guy, like you said. You can get him, you can show him a coverage and get him if you show him that, hey, you might have the deeper route available, you might have this big play available, he'll take it. And if you can bait him in the right way, you can make picks, because he is going to try and hit big plays even when the coverage says he probably shouldn't.
KC Joyner is with us looking back at championship weekend. I want to go a little back to this game. And, the Packers came in with, their defense was pretty good this year. Their pass rush was probably better than the run. And so yesterday, San Francisco really game planned well for that. We saw the Eagles here the night they played Green Bay. They couldn't stop the run at all that night. But when you look at that Green Bay defense, did you like the way, what their game plan was defensively in that game? Could they have made some adjustments to take San Francisco out of that, or is San Francisco just that efficient at what they do?
I thought it was the biggest mismatch of the weekend coming into the contest, that Green Bay hadn't shown an ability to stop running backs at all, and that teams sometimes didn't attack it nearly as much as they should. And you look at the Niners, I don't understand why teams don't use more fullbacks, because when you use a fullback, there are running plays available to you that aren't available to you when you don't have a running back or we don't have a fullback. I mean, if you want to run isolation plays, you could do it. If you have a one-back set, you're not going to be able to run isolation plays, among other things. But you look at the 49ers, they use Tololo. They used Kittle on 96% of the snaps. They used Tololo, their backup tight end, on 27% of the snaps. They even put Dwelly, their third-string tight end, in on 15% of their snaps. And that's addition to having the fullback out there. Yusha got there with 73% of the snaps. They just said, we're going to put big bodies against you guys. And I think that Green Bay did kind of sit back too much for the pass at first, but even when they realized they needed to stop the run, it doesn't matter. If you don't have people who can win the point of attack blocks, we talked about that in the first contest. If you can't win in that front seven, if you don't win point of attack blocks there and you're not winning your share and making tackles when you win and stopping people for losses, if you can't win there, you're never going to stop the ground game. I don't care if you bring the eighth guy in the box all you want. If you can't win at those point of attack blocks, you're not going to do anything, and they won an atrociously low percentage of those blocks. So I think it was just a matter of they don't have good enough people to stop a ground game like that.
You mentioned Rodgers, Peterson. You mentioned Rodgers, and we talked about him back in the 2 o'clock hour, and I said, I just didn't think he was the same Like, are you starting to see a decline in Rodgers? Is he the same guy that just carried that team for so long, or is he taking it? Is his play dipping a little bit, or was it just yesterday? Did he not play as well as we thought?
Remember what he was when it was with McCarthy. Remember a lot of what that was McCarthy would. How many times do we see this? McCarthy would make a call. You could see that Rodgers would either change the call or he said, "I'm going to go do what I want." I don't think he's doing what he wants in this offense. I think LaFleur told him, "You can't do that anymore. You're going to call the plays I call." And look, it's working. I mean, they made the conference championship in a team that probably didn't have the talent level to do that. So I mean, it worked. But he's not able to just say, "I'm going to go ahead and scramble and do the things that I want," because that's a lot of what he did in past years, was just, "I'm going to go ahead and scramble and do what I want." And now he's operating that sort of an offense. And as a defense, if he's going to go out there and say, "Okay, I'm going to go throw the route combinations that LaFleur is calling, and I'm going to do what the system says to do," if that's what you're doing and you're turning Rodgers into a system quarterback instead of a guy who can scramble around and say, "Fine, I'm going to find somebody open deep and crush you that way," I think he's less dangerous in that setup.
I think if you gave him a little bit more speed, I mean, we all know Devontae Adams is a great wide receiver, not the fastest guy in the world. If you just upgraded from Kumaro and Lazard, not that those guys are bad, but I mean, if you just threw a little bit of speed on the field, you might see a little bit different of an offensive complexion. They had to rely so much on Aaron Jones to kind of stretch.
Yep, and that's the thing. They want to be a power running team and then throw vertical, but Adams is your only vertical threat. And I love what the 49ers did early, too, when they said, "Okay, we're going to move Sherman with Adams," and then they didn't. They were at least showing Green Bay that you're going to have to think about him moving. We're probably not going to shadow, but we did it early on. Just at least put it in your head. We might do this. And, Adams still had a good game overall in the second half. That was when the 49ers were playing all those soft coverages and just giving a lot of plays up. But if you put Sammy Watkins on the Packers and you say, "Okay, now he's your secondary guy, a guy who could tear the top of the defense," yeah, but I mean, Lazard, Allison played 54% of snaps yesterday, too. He's not anything to speak of, and Jimmy Graham's terrible. I mean, they just don't have any targets. Yeah, they just have a one-man passing game, and I think that's the other part of it, too. But in his prime, I think if Rodgers is be able to do his scramble around, I think he does different things against this defense than he did yesterday.
What do you think is harder to defend, San Francisco's running game or KC's passing game?
KC's passing game, because in San Francisco's running game, if you can win the point of attack blocks, or at least you can have safeties come up and keep those ground games to a minimum, you can maybe say, okay, you can keep those gains to whatever. You can make, if you're not letting the breakaway runs happen, I think it's easier to stop. Whereas with Kansas City's passing game, all it takes is one bad play, and you've got Hill going for 60, you've got Hardman going for 60, you've got Watkins going for, somebody's going to be able to tear off a gargantuan gain. I think it's easier to keep San Francisco from getting those big gainers, so that's what worries me more.
All right, Super Bowl set. We'll be previewing it all week. Casey will be back. We'll get his thoughts closer to the game on this game. We'll dig a little deeper into all that, and of course, we'll have Super Bowl 54 right here on 97.3 ESPN. It's San Francisco. It is Kansas City. Reed and Shanahan, and of course, we'll have it all right here on 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, pal.
Appreciate it.
KC Joyner, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. So it's going to be, at least it's a fun, intriguing game to break down. It's not, a boring game. There's storylines. There's contrast of styles. There's stars. It's kind of fun. Should be a good one, and we'll have plenty more on it. So the one big surprise of the weekend, I thought, and he mentioned, was the mismatch of the weekend was Green Bay's defense up against that run game.
Especially their run D, yeah.
But I thought the biggest surprise of the weekend was that that Tennessee got a 10, not that Kansas City came back, but that Tennessee had the perfect setup for them and let it slip away. That's what surprised me the most.
Shows how good I think the Chiefs offense and Mahomes are playing right now.
Yeah. And they're poised, right, that they could fall behind. Like, you wonder if they didn't have that 24-point comeback the week before, if they would have worried a little bit more being down 10-0 early to the Titans.
Yeah. All right. Well, good stuff from Casey and John. And coming up at 7:30 tonight, we've got more basketball, Lakers, Celtics, and of course, all right here on 97.3 ESPN. For Moshe, Ryan, I'm Mike. Josh Henning produced today's show. Have a great rest of your Monday, everybody.